name is Carrie. I'm a librarian with the Elyria Library. I'm currently on a Friday field trip to the under construction log cabin orchards in Apiary in Strongsville. Beside me is the owner and developer of Log Cabin Orchards. This is Scott Rhoda. Say hello.
Hello everybody. Thank you for watching.
And to the side over here we have about 10,000 honeybees. So we are here today because Mr. Rhoda invited us to talk about his honeybees, why it's important to have honeybees, and where honey comes from. So first, what are we looking at here in the wagon?
All right. Well, here in the wagon we've got some frames. Provided there's enough honey in there to get them through winter, we're going to try and pull 3 or 4 frames in order to make it possible for you to see how honey is actually extracted from a beehive. I've got some basic tools with me. I'm going to show you what the tools are, and then as we go through I'll try and point out some things in the hive that are, pretty exciting and extremely interesting. But before we open up the hive, we want to use a smoker. A smoker actually takes, burnable material, combustible material, heats it up just enough to create smoke, which isn't toxic to the bees, but they do not like the smell. So in order to, corral them to one particular area or the other, we use the smoke to move the bees around.
So that's why we're not wearing the bee astronaut suit?
Well, the bee suits, those are for when certain times of the day, particularly early morning, late in the evening, when it starts to get dark, the forager bees, the ones that actually go out and grab the honey, those are the ones that are more protective and more aggressive. Those are the ones that will typically sting you. This here inside the hive, these are inner worker bees, nurse bees. They're pretty docile. They're the younger age group of the bees. So what we do is, if we're in a situation and we think they may be aggressive, we'll suit up. But we like to start off without the suits. Smoker's right here. We just use burlap and a little bit of straw. And then this part here, this actually helps feed oxygen to the flames. Now once the flame gets going, it starts to heat up. Then what we'll do is once it gets to temperature, we'll close the lid. That will reduce the oxygen and cause it to start smoking rather than burning. These are called Hive Tools. What we use these for are to open the boxes, to separate the frames, and it allows us to give us some leverage to lift them. Bees make almost like a glue called propolis, and it's very sticky. So with this, we use it to pry the frames out of the box.
So it cements the frames in the box.
It does. So let's start over here. Take a peek in here, our first hive.
So what kind of hives are these? They don't look like the nests in the wild.
No. These are all Langstrom hives. It's a design that's been around for over 100 years. With the individual frames, they're layered on top of each other. That way, rather than opening up one big nest, you're able to separate the nest or the hive and pull the honey out when you're working with the bees and harvesting. All right, this here, these are called flow hives. We just put these in about a month ago. Too late in the season for them to fill them up with honey, but come springtime, it's got a drainage system in it where it's less invasive to the bee colony. We don't have to actually tear it apart and pull the frames out and replace them. What we do is we actually have a valve in here. We open the valve and the honey comes out from each of the 8 frames.
And that's just the top?
That's just the top one. The bottom 4, those are all your standard lengths from frames.
And down here, this is like their doggy door to get in and out?
Yep, this is their entrance. They come in and out. Just that little bit of space, they use that to come and go. Now that propolis, it'll actually hold each of the boxes together. So we always start, you hear that crack? That's that propolis separating. You always want to lift straight up so you don't injure any of the bees. This screen here, we call it a queen excluder. All the bees are able to go through there with the exception of the queen. The queen is almost twice the size of the rest of the bees. So this prevents her going up into the flow hive, which will make this strictly honey. The worker bees will be able to store honey in here, but she won't be able to put any brood in there or eggs. Now if you watch as I start putting smoke on them, you'll see them disperse and they'll actually work their way down into the hive away from the smoke.
And it just annoys them, it doesn't hurt them, right?
It doesn't hurt them. Now if you get closer, you can hear them. What they're doing is they're inside the hive around the brood cells. Those are the honeycomb cells where they lay the eggs and then the eggs grow into young honeybees. They cover them, and with their wings, they'll flap their wings to control the temperature in there. So as we go down,
This is the propolis you were talking about?
yes, yeah, this orange film, orange and yellow film, it's not wax, it's not honey, it's actually its own chemical makeup, and it's called propolis. Now if you look here, these are your honeycombs. So there's no brood in here. This is all honey. They're getting ready for winter. They're storing up honey, and that's how they feed themselves and the eggs and the larvae as they grow along. Now if you look here, the shiny yellow, that's uncapped honey. Now the reason it doesn't have a covering over it like this honey here is, in order for honey to last for long periods of time, almost indefinitely, it has to have a water content of less than 16%. Once they let it evaporate and it thickens up to honey, that water content will be below 16%. Then they'll come over and they'll put a wax coating over that cell. So they regulate it, they let it sit to temperature, and then when it's at the right temperature or the right humidity, they'll cover it up and it'll last indefinitely until they need it or we harvest it.
Is it true that honey never goes bad?
It is true. So they are nature's miracle workers. You know, they have probiotics and all kinds of enzymes that they create which help their young grow so quickly and keeps the hive healthy. Now you can see this is the base of the frame, and then you can see how they build it up as they go along. So they'll work their way from the center out. We're going to let them continue to work on these. We're going to separate this frame and we're going to take a look, see what's underneath it.
That one?
Yeah, a little smoke on it. Now bees, when the eggs are laid, they're actually, the sex hasn't been determined yet. So it's all in the process of the bees being fed and cared for is what determines their sex. So what they'll do is, reason being you see less bees in the fall time and it gets to a point where you don't see bees at all, it's because they are reducing the number of foraging bees and eliminating the male bees in the hive population. So what they'll do is they'll just maintain the inner core of bees, and those are what will reproduce until springtime. Once the springtime comes, temperatures start to rise, then they'll start hatching the eggs as males to, for reproduction.
Okay, so these are worker bees?
These are all worker bees.
They're all girls.
Now, if you get in a little closer, you can see where, as they work, the combs are actually coming together where the frames are. So we need to be cautious when we separate it. This is all honey. Each one of these frames weigh between 8 and 10 pounds. So that's all honey, about 8 pounds of honey for each one of these frames.
And we're not taking all of these out, right?
No, the bees, in order for a hive to get through winter, they need between 80 pounds to 120 pounds of honey to sustain them through the cold of winter, because they won't be able to go out and forage. So everything that they need is going to be, stored in here. So we need to make sure that that's provided for them. And this one's all honey.
That's 10 pounds in that itty bitty little frame.
That is. That's 10 pounds of honey.
Do you have to use a special brush, or what kind of brush are you using?
This is a horsehair brush. So it's not necessarily a special brush. We just don't want anything that's going to be rigid and injure the bees. Now these bottom cells down here, those are actually pollen. Bees need two things to survive, just like we do. They need carbohydrates and they need protein. The honey provides the carbohydrates. The pollen, that is their source of protein. Yep. we're looking for a frame so we can get them on film too. Babies you're typically going to find in the lower portion of the hive.
So when you go to extract honey from a frame, how do you know you aren't like trying to extract their nursery?
Well, that's why I take my time and I look through the whole frame.
Mm-hmm.
So between that last frame, the only thing we saw in each of the cells were honey and pollen. This one's a lot of pollen. If you look here, this whole section here, that's all pollen. These ones here that look like little muffins or cupcakes, those are actually the larva. If you look in here, in between these ones, you can actually see the eggs. It looks like a little grain of rice. And then as that egg grows, it takes about a week. It turns into a larva, and then at that point, the worker bees or the nurse bees will cover it with that coating to make it look like a cupcake or a muffin, and that's where they'll spend their last 7 days growing into a young bee.
A full-fledged member of the society.
Yep, full-fledged.
So we're not going to take that one.
No, we're not going to take that one. This is the future of the hive in there. We're going to let them continue to care for them. I've got some empty frames right here. We're going to replace the ones that we took out. We want them to, have room to continue, caring for the hive. So what they'll do is they'll take these old frames, clean them up, and then they'll start putting new cells in there. These are the 3 frames that we took out of the hive back there. We didn't want to take too many. We want to make sure we leave enough for them for winter. But we, with these 3 frames, we chose the ones that had the honey in it. So as you see, all this coating over it, that wax coating, that means the honey's been capped and it is ready, to eat and ready to be preserved. So
this is what actual beeswax is, the stuff that makes the candles and the little novelty stuff and the chapstick.
So when you see chemically made candles, plastics, and you compare them to the price of beeswax candles, beeswax candles are a lot more expensive. They burn nicer, and in order to get the beeswax, it's pretty labor intensive. So this knife here is designed for taking the wax off the top of the comb, which will let the honey flow from the frame into our honey extractor. So all we're doing is just scoring the top of that, taking that thin layer of wax off, so all that honey has a chance to come out and end up on our breakfast table.
So I went out to a restaurant once and I ordered one of those fancy cheese plates, and it came with a chunk of honeycomb on there.
Yep.
Honeycomb's edible?
It is. And it's actually very good for you. Like I said, the bees, with all the enzymes that they use, their bodies produce and create all this. There's a lot of good probiotics and other nutrients that are extremely healthy for us.
So do those enzymes and probiotics, do those get lost when they pasteurize it to sell it in the stores and the honey bears?
They do. They do. The fresh honey is much better for you. Whenever they put it on heat and they go through the filtration system that they do commercially, they lose a lot of that positive health benefits.
But they do that so it doesn't crystallize in the bear.
Correct. Yeah. And even the crystallized honey, you can still eat.
It's still delicious. I've eaten it.
Yep, it's like candy. So when you see your honey do that, don't worry about it. Don't throw it away, because it's very yummy.
So what is this Star Wars looking contraption here?
This is called an extractor. What this does, it spins the frames so the honey, one of those grates there, you can pass that to me, please. So what it does is it spins the honey, and the centrifugal force pushes the honey to the outside of this container, and that way you get as much of the honey out of the comb as possible.
It's like the spin cycle on the washing machine?
Yeah, exactly. All right. This tool is used just to scrape off those, rather than cut that top layer of wax off. We use this to scrape the cappings off. And like I said, all we're doing is just enough so that honey will come out of there when we put it in the extractor. Now, you asked, how I got started doing this. I've always wanted to farm, especially an orchard. So that's how we got started, doing this. Farming is so dependent on bees, and our existence depends on the bees. Their ability to go out and pollinate and make our plants reproduce is what keeps us thriving. If it weren't for bees, mankind would be in trouble. Did a little bit of research on line, read about them through books, a lot of books, and then I went and met with the great folks at Queen Wright Colonies in Spencer, Ohio, and they helped me put together, everything that I need to, start caring for bees. And we'll be doing this for the rest of our lives.
So why go through all this trouble to keep the bees? Why not use the wild bees?
Well, the problem is with chemicals and air pollution from vehicles, it's reduced our bee population, and there's countries, China for one, where they've actually eliminated their bee population, and their farmers actually have to take pollen by hand, climb trees in certain areas to fertilize their fruit trees. And that's all because of the pollution and the extinction of their particular
Habitat?
Yeah. And if you come up here and you look down, you'll be able to see the If you look in there, you can see how it throws it to the outside of the container. All that honey will drip down and then pool here, and then once it's done draining, we'll open this up, we'll pour it into a container, and then that's where we'll filter it, and we'll put it into bottles for sale.
All right, so it's going to be a couple of hours before the honey's ready to drip down into the bucket. So I'm just going to, on behalf of the Elyria Library, thanks for inviting us down. Again, this was Scott Rhoda. He's with Log Cabin Orchards and Apiary in Strongsville. And this has been our Friday field trip. Have a good day.